Let's talk about these two leaders that face the same fate. Saddam Hussein versus Muammar Gaddafi. They are considered dictators according to the Western media. Is it just a Western media propaganda, or is it just a way of turning their face against their country? But what's the effect of these two leaders' death? Has the death of these two leaders brought good things to their country, or has it just put their country in a worse state of condition? Why is it two dictators killed for one reason? They mentioned one word and they were killed. What's so special about this? And why is it that oil should be sold in dollar, not any other currency? Is there anything so special that oil should be sold in dollar, not gold, not euro or pounds? Why is that any African leader or any country leader said that he wants to sell his oil in euro or gold, end up facing one fate? A lot of people has a lot of story about these two leaders, but let's check what really happened to these people and what was their mistake that led to their death, or do they really deserve to die? According to the former US President Donald Trump said that the world could have been better with Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi in power.
But we certainly have not gained anything with Gaddafi, and you look at what happened. I mean, look at Libya, look at Iraq. Iraq used to be no terrorism. He would kill the terrorists immediately. It was like, now it's the Harvard of terrorism. Iraq. If you look at Iraq from years ago, I'm not saying he was a nice guy, he was a horrible guy, but it was a lot better than it is right now. Right now, Iraq is a training ground for terrorists. Right now, Libya, nobody even knows Libya. Frankly, there is no Iraq and there is no Libya. It's all broken up. They have no control. Nobody knows what's going on.
The world would be better off with Saddam Hussein
100%.
And Gaddafi in power?
100%.
Today we're going to do a side comparison between Saddam Hussein versus Muammar Gaddafi. What led to their death, or why were they assassinated by the Western world? Assassination of these two dictators bring any good to their country, or was it just made the country more worse in crisis and economic downfall? Saddam Hussein was the 5th president of Iraq, born 28 April 1937, died at the age of 69, 2006. Saddam ruled Iraq for 44 years from 1979 to 2003. Gaddafi, president of Libya. Gaddafi took power 1st September 1969 after leading a coup to overthrow King Idris' rule. Gaddafi was born 1942, died at the age of 69, 2011. But if you notice these two men, they died at the same age. Saddam Hussein died at the age of 69. Muammar Gaddafi died at the age of 69. Was it like a conspiracy that these two dictators would die at the age of 69? Saddam Hussein died 2006 at the age of 69. Muammar Gaddafi died 2011 at the age of 69. Is it just a coincidence, or was it a conspiracy behind it? If you want to watch a video about African leaders that have been assassinated, I did a separate video on my channel to watch about that. How did it all started with these two dictators of their own country? The early 2000s, Saddam announced that his government will no longer be selling oil in dollars, but will be selling his oil in euros. First of all, what's the big deal if Saddam decided that he don't want to sell his oil in dollars, he wants to sell his oil in euro? The big deal is that Iran has the 5th largest oil reserve. In the early 2000s, Iraq has become the 5th largest oil producer in the world. So after Saddam Hussein has announced that his government is not going to sell oil in dollar, so in 2003, Saddam Hussein has sold over 3 billion barrels of oil for 26 billion euros. Months later, the US invade Iran over claim of Saddam has a weapon of mass destruction.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Years later, after the invasion of Iraq, some US officials that were in charge of the Iraq invasion start telling the truth. What I mean, top officials, like people that were involved on the invasion of Iraq, like the chiefs of staffs, the military head, start giving out the truth and start doing some confession. Former head of US operation in Iraq, General John Abaza, said, "Of course, it's about oil. We can't really deny that." John Abaza said of the Iran war. Former Fed chairman Alazan Greenspan wrote in his memo that, quote, "I'm certain that it's political inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows. The Iran war is about oil." People said we are not fighting over oil. Of course we are. Chuck Hagen. After the invasion of Iraq, some experts believe that the invasion of Iraq was more about the oil of Iraq and its reserve, and why Saddam Hussein shifts its interest from selling its oil from dollar to euro. Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has the largest oil reserve in Africa, but when Gaddafi was in power, Gaddafi managed all these oil revenues, building up to 143 tons of gold reserve according to WikiLeaks. Under Gaddafi rule, Libya has the highest GDP in Africa. Similar to Saddam Hussein of Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi suggests that any African country or European or the Western world buying oil from Libya should use a single currency backed by gold, which is the gold dinar. So by now you should know what happened next, because now Muammar Gaddafi said that he's not going to be selling his oil on dollars, but he's going to sell his oil with the gold dinar. Muammar Gaddafi introduced the gold dinar, which is a single African currency which all African nations should use to buy gold from Libya. That he's not going to be selling his oil in dollars anymore. But the unique part about this Muammar Gaddafi's own was that now if you want to trade with Libya now, it will not be depend on how much dollar you have on your reserve, but it will be how much gold you have or not. It will not be long like how much US dollar you have or stash or skip in the bank. It depends on your gold for you to buy Libyan oil. One thing you should understand that in the 1900s, the world reserve was in gold, but in 1943, the US President Franklin Roosevelt changed the world reserve from gold to the US dollar, which was the central bank reserve currency, to become the dollar. Replaced it with the petrodollar. So you can see how this thing all started. Now Muammar Gaddafi now needed a currency that would be backed with gold, which was how it was in the 1900s, not being the petrodollar or the US dollar anymore, that any currency that you can just go that the bank prints. One thing you should understand about the dollar is that it's the bank that prints the money, not the government. So the US can now just decide to print any amount of dollar they want, depend on how much reserve of gold your country have, and that will depend on how rich your country is. So if your country doesn't have much gold, you cannot purchase much of Libyan oil. 2003, after Gaddafi has witnessed the invasion of Iraq, Gaddafi won in an Arab League summit that we might be next in an Arab League summit. The Americans hung Saddam that they should come together for something like that not to happen to them. But one thing about Gaddafi was that Gaddafi believed that when he was the president of the African Union, he believed that with the support of other African leaders and their countries, his fate would not be like Saddam Hussein. But under Gaddafi's reign as the president of the African Union, he suggested that all Africans should have one passport, one military. But according to the West, this wasn't a problem for all African countries to have a single passport, a single military. Where the problem was this united African currency that will be backed with gold. Don't forget that the world reserve currency is in dollars, but Gaddafi was planning to introduce a currency that all African countries should use, which was the gold dinar. This was where all the problems started. Just like what Saddam Hussein did, introducing that he's not going to sell his oil in dollar, he wants to sell in euro. But instead, Gaddafi said that he's not going to sell his oil in euro or dollar. He's going to sell his oil in the gold dinar. In 2011, NATO led an invasion on Libya in the name of freedom and humanitarian reason to overthrow Gaddafi's government. The 20th of August 2011, Muammar Gaddafi was executed by Libyan rebels and with the help of NATO forces. The funny thing about overthrowing Gaddafi's government and the execution of Gaddafi, years later it was discovered in Hillary Clinton's email that NATO really wanted to overthrow Gaddafi's government. But the question is that why did they really want to overthrow Gaddafi's government? What did he really do for them to overthrow Gaddafi's government? And it was spotted in Hillary Clinton's email. The reason that was found that they really wanted to overthrow Gaddafi's government was because of the currency that were backed by the gold, which was the gold dinar. But don't forget, Gaddafi wanted to create a single African currency, which is the gold dinar, which will be backed by gold. So now, the West didn't like this agenda for the African country, and if you don't understand now, this single African currency now will become a freedom to the African nation, and we will free them from the IMF, from more borrowing and borrowing. Now, with a lot of experts debating about the Libyan crisis, first of all, if NATO was all about humanitarian peacekeeping, why did the NATO force blown up Gaddafi's irrigation pipeline, which was recorded in Guinness World Record as the single irrigation pipeline that supply water to farmland in Libya? Now, the problem about this pipeline is that it was built by Libyan money and it was not funded by any international organization like the IMF, where all African countries go to borrow money or get support. It was all funded by Libyan bank and Libyan resource. So since the NATO forces went for a peacekeeping mission, so why would they bomb this pipeline? And after bombing this pipeline, they went as far as bombing the factory that is producing this pipeline, so they cannot rebuild such a project. But it was all about peacekeeping mission. Maybe the pipe was also fighting against them, and maybe there were rebels under the pipe. Maybe that's why they may blow it up, because a lot of people are debating why should they blow up a pipeline that has nothing to do with Gaddafi. Why should they bomb an irrigation system that is meant to supply water to Libyan farmland, and even go as far as bombing the factory that is producing these pipes? So, but if you check about these two dictators that they claim that the Western media propaganda has talked about, you see that it's all about currency domination and oil interest. First of all, you should understand something. It's all about the oil and the currency domination. As an analyst, first of all, you ask yourself, why is it so important that oil should be sold in dollar, not any other currency? It's like the euro, the dinar, the gold. What's so important? So I'll see you in my next video. Drop your thoughts on this video and I'll be there to reply all your comments.